I was struggling financially. After 9 months out of work, I got Homeland.
Taking acting classes as a kid has informed my life in a million different ways. You went to RADA.
I did.
And now you are the president of RADA.
El Presidente.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well.
Lovely to see you.
You too.
Look at this.
I know, it's gorgeous. So look, you know, the last time we met, we were also in a theatre. So we have this thing about, obviously we keep meeting in theatres.
We do.
We do.
Maybe we should keep this going forever and never meet outside the theatre. Maybe we should. That would be great.
Talking about theatres, when did you start acting? Were you always interested in theatre?
Yeah, I mean, I started when I was like really little, when I was about 7 is when I did my first professional job, which is crazy to think about now. I feel like I see a 7-year-old like today and I'd be like, this is insane that I was your age. But I just loved it. But I started by going to like a theatre class with my friend who wanted to go.
Wow.
I fell in love with acting and performing and all of it just more and more every time I did it. And the first job that I did was Les Mis at what was then the Queen's Theatre in London.
Oh my God.
Which was just so surreal. I mean, I was Little Eponine, so I did practically nothing apart from just exist in the theatre, which was absolutely surreal.
A paying audience were coming and you were actually on stage in the West End?
Yeah, I was. It was like, it was so random. Like my parents kind of aren't in the industry at all, but, you know, went to this audition that I got and like my mum came up to London with me, my grandma came up to London and I got the day off school. It was a Wednesday. I was like, couldn't believe it. And yeah, I went into London and managed to kind of get the part, which was just, yeah, unbelievable.
Can you remember how you felt when you got the part?
Absolutely thrilled. My mum told me actually that they sent, and I do remember this, they sent the script in the post and like it came through the door and my mum said immediately I like grabbed it and like read the whole thing and like highlighted the lines that I didn't have and just became obsessed with it. How about you? How did you kind of start?
I had no idea. I mean, look, I was just a classroom clown. I was rubbish at academia, rubbish. But I loved going to school because my mates were there. All my mates with all my good friends were there. I didn't get school, so I was sort of like, I'm bored. I was bored. And I think that then led to me sort of being at school plays. I would sort of volunteer for school plays. And literally, like 5 weeks before I was going to leave, my teacher phoned me up and asked me to come into school.
You're thinking, oh no.
I was, because I was thinking, what have I done wrong? You know, I can remember it, and if I listen closely, I can still hear him say it. But he said to me, what are you going to do when you leave? And I was like 15, and I kind of said, I don't know, sir. And he said, well, we've been talking in the staff room, and we think you should be an actor.
Wow.
And I went, what? I can actually do that? I can be an actor? I just never thought that was even possible.
You got it!
And honestly, it was a eureka moment. I had no idea that that's what you could do. There weren't any black actors. There were very few black actors when I was growing up. But it just gripped me, and I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. And suddenly all this make-believe and play acting that I'd been doing sort of made sense. I auditioned for the Birmingham Youth Theatre about 3 weeks later, got rejected. Auditioned for the National Youth Theatre, got accepted, and then just met all these other actors and suddenly thought, that's my tribe.
Wow.
These are the people that I want to be around.
So with that teacher that kind of told you, how do you feel about them now? Do you think they were kind of massively pivotal, I guess, in your career?
Massively pivotal. I mean, he literally, everything I owned, the house that I bought, everything, literally my entire life literally took a right turn because of that one person. In fact, a couple of years ago, I did a documentary where I went back to my old school. It was a sort of X Factor type thing where I picked 8 students, did some Shakespeare with them, and then we travelled down to London and we put them all on the stage of the Globe.
Oh, wow.
And they got to perform their scenes on the stage of the Globe. And it's really funny because I got an Instagram message a couple of years ago saying, you know that kid that you worked with on that documentary, he's now about to play Romeo for the RSC.
No.
And I just went, that's fantastic. Your old teachers obviously saw something in you. I
do think about this. There's been so many people that I've met at key points that just keep you going.
Are they friends? Are they people that you rely on for advice as well?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture. You know, my friends that I've had since a kid and my family and my parents. I think back now and I think how impossible it would have been for me to do any of the shows and theatre that I did as a kid without my parents being able to accommodate it. I feel very lucky to have parents that were able to kind of help me do that. How did your parents feel about you kind of getting into acting?
Again, you know, as I said, I grew up late 60s, 70s, and there really were very few black actors. I remember back in the day, if a black actor came on the television, we would literally run to the end of the street and go, "There's a black actor on the television!" But it was just so unusual to see a black person on the television. So when I went home from school and said to my parents, "I think I'm going to be an actor," I mean, they couldn't quite get their heads around it, and they were really worried for me, to be honest with them. Especially my dad. He was like, "Are you sure about that, son?" And really questioned it and questioned whether I was making the right decision. And in fact, I didn't know if I was making the right decision, because it wasn't a world that I was familiar with. I didn't train as a kid. I value my parents for their boldness and allowing me to do it, but they had no idea the world that I was stepping into. And I didn't know. Is there a piece of advice that you've ever received that stuck with you?
I mean, advice. My mum's always said something to me that I love, which is life's not over, no one's dead. And it's, in the case of things kind of being blown out of proportion and thinking that the world's, over. And I always try and keep that with me, especially with, the profession that we're in. And at the end of the day, kind of remembering where we are. I still live at home, and very much going home at the end of every day and sitting with my mum and my dog watching TV is the best advice sessions.
I think that's important, and I think you should hold on to that. So if you were a child performer, have you always had a sort of destination in mind or a career in mind? I'm
not sure. I think as a kid, I just loved it so much and was very lucky and blessed that I was able to kind of do these jobs and continue to love it more. I think most of my sort of training came through doing it because I didn't go to any kind of drama school or, actually go to drama school, and just went and after school travelled up to London and did a show and then came back and went to school in the morning.
Oh, wow.
You don't really know what you're getting into, but you just kind of have to have blind faith, I guess, if you're willing to kind of take the jump to try and do it.
Have you had times when you've maybe felt challenged or found yourself in a bit of a pickle? And how have you got out of it?
It's hard, especially as a kid. I think it was something that I kind of had to learn quite quickly, like how to deal with rejection, I guess. I became so used to it at an early age that it was just a kind of thing of having to bounce back and go again and get on the train and do the next audition and go to the next class. But it's still something that I think I'm learning.
In fact, I think you learn more from, and this is what Ed Zwick once said to me, is that you learn more from failure than you do from success. But when things are working, it's great. Happy days.
Yeah.
But if one of your movies or one of your projects suddenly fails, you sit there and go, hang on a minute, why did that fail?
Yeah, true.
What did I do wrong? What can I do better? That's when you really learn. So I think that you're bound to have times in your life when it's tough, whether it's emotional, personal, professional, it's just bound to happen. I mean, you've just had a massive hit, right? You're in a big show right now. Has that changed your perspective, where you want to go or what the kind of work that you want to do?
I think for me, it's kind of been the transition between theatre to screen that I found the most challenging. Having done lots of musical theatre, especially as a child, making that transition into screen was something that I was so desperate to do. But even now, I think they're so different. And when I first kind of transitioned into screen, I just remember doing castings, and every time it was the casting director being like, be smaller, be smaller
yeah.
and smaller and smaller. And I was like, what does that mean? I was like, what does it mean? Yeah. I wonder how you've kind of felt in going between the two.
I was struggling financially and in a really, really bad spot. And then literally, after 9 months out of work, I got Homeland. I remember arriving in America and first time I'd ever done an American accent. And I remember asking one of the drivers, I said, can you take me to the set? Because they'd already started filming. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to just observe. And I would just sit in the corner and just watch Mandy Patinkin and Claire Danes. I just watch them work. And I always say this to other actors is, get out your trailer and go and have a look at what people are doing, particularly if you're working with great people.
Yeah.
So what's the best piece of direction that you've received from a director or an actor or a friend?
I think the movie that I just did, the directors on that, Danny Girdwood and Charlotte Fassler, were just amazing. They're a duo, which was so interesting. But I found with them, like, half of the time I didn't even realise that they were directing me. It would be more of a discussion rather than kind of a piece of direction, I guess. You know, it was an approach of direction that I haven't really had before, where it was so subtle and it felt like I was kind of discovering things through what they were kind of offering up and discussing, which I felt really worked with me.
Yeah.
And how about you?
At drama school, wonderful director that I still practice today. And he would say to me, don't learn your lines, stare at the page. And what it does, particularly with Shakespeare, is you start to see all these images just
I so understand
come
that.
up. And just, you know, it's like a map.
Wow. So you went to RADA.
I did.
And now you are the president of RADA.
El Presidente.
El Presidente, which is, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. And I'm kind of intrigued as to what you think can kind of be done in the industry to support, you know, new talent and younger actors, I suppose.
I just think it's really, really important that we make arts accessible, because I think it's a diversity of thought that keeps drama, keeps things lively, keeps things active.
Yeah, and I think it's so amazing and important having people like you doing that for younger actors. You know, taking acting classes as a kid and has informed my life in a million different ways. And I think it's such a beneficial thing to do for anybody, but especially at drama school, and making it more accessible, I think, is just everything.